This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
100 Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records. You can go to metalblade.com to learn more about us if you would like. Hey, everybody, when you're in Las Vegas, you need to go to the Metal Blade Museum, one of the only heavy metal museums in the country where we have tons of stuff from Metal Blade, but also artists like, well, of course, Slayer and Metallica, which started with Metal Blade, but also Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Deep Purple, Alice Cooper, Stars, Thin Lizzy, so much more. It's a really great peek at the world of heavy metal. There's tons of displays and guitars and drum sets and all sorts of really cool things. And it's only about 5 minutes from the Strip. So go to metalblade.com/museum for all the details. And also, our store now, which used to be in another part of Las Vegas, is now located inside the Metal Blade Museum. And by the way, it's free to get into the store as well. You can learn everything at metalblade.com/museum and go check it out the next time you're in Las Vegas. If you don't know, my favorite band of all time is Iron Maiden. And we have not done a good enough job talking about them on this podcast. However, that's changing. Of course, I had to save some of the best for last, right? And this is a classic, absolute, phenomenal, legendary song that certainly lives up to the name of the podcast. We're going to talk about Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Iron Maiden, the 13-minute-long epic that came out back in the 1880s and really set the standard for long-form, progressive metal, whatever you want to call it, songs. Just a terrific song. I'm going to have one of my really good friends who's a fellow Maiden fanatic. He and I have seen Iron Maiden all across the world. My really good friend, Mr. Vaughn Lewis, he manages a whole bunch of bands that we'll mention in a couple minutes. But how do you get somebody on here that is as big a fanatic of Iron Maiden as I am? So it's going to be a fun chat. We're going to talk to Jay Ruston about the production part of it. As always, we begin up to the north in the beautiful country of Canada. Mr. Martin Popoff, what say you?
Nice choice, Brian. Rime of the Ancient Mariner. We know Brian likes his Iron Maiden, of course. But yeah, love this album as well. Rime of the Ancient Mariner, based on the Samuel Taylor Coleridge poem of the same name. We're talking the Power Slave album, September 3rd, 1984. I always loved this album. This album to me sounds like a 3-beer version of Peace of Mind. It does sound a little bit like a Peace of Mind Part 2. Same way Master of Puppets to me is kind of a Ride the Lightning Part 2. Or Act 2. But yeah, this is a great album. What we have happening here is the last track on the album. It is 13:45 long, so super long Maiden song. And it starts a tradition of having a lot of these. We got Long Distance Runner, and we've got, Sign of the Cross, bunch of them coming up later on. But this kind of starts Iron Maiden really feeling that they can lean into this being incredibly progressive. Now, is it a progressive song? Not particularly. I think this is one of the reasons why it's absolutely a fan favorite. And by the way, it's a favorite of Dave's and Bruce's and Steve's to play live. They all love it. The cool thing about this track is that, it maybe is, you could look at it as the next step past Hallowed Be Thy Name, probably the most beloved Iron Maiden song. But this is kind of the same thing again, only a longer and more belabored version. But why do I compare the two? It's because it has a classic kind of upper mid-pace gallop to it. It's got these great Nico fills now. So Nico obviously wasn't on the song we're comparing it to here, but Nico is emphatically on the previous album, and here he's giving us those classic start the fill early at the end of the bar kind of a feel, and it gives the song a really nice hooky rhythmic feel. We've got this mid-pace gallop, this hooky rhythm, these Egypto-sounding twin leads that go with the album cover. We've got the classic, there's some quoting from the poem here, the water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. We've got a section where it picks up at 3:07, it picks up, but it's still a gallop. So they're maintaining the idea of the trademark Iron Maiden gallop here.
Can she sail with no wind in her sails or no tide? See, onward she comes, onward she leads, out of the sea. See, she has no crew, she has no life. Wait for this too.
Then we get that slow, quiet part, where the boat's drifting and it's kind of spooky and cool. That's a neat creative thing they do there. There's a key change for the solo section. Still, we have a form of a gallop type feel. And then what I really love about this song, it never really feels particularly long. These parts are so catchy that you're just singing along, humming along. You got your fist in the air. But the neat thing is it returns to the opening theme at the end, and we get another verse or two verses. I don't know how many verses we get, but we're back to the verse structure, and it just really sounds triumphant. There's no messing around at the end. We just get to the end of the song. They wrap it up, relatively quickly kind of thing. So this best part of the song returns at the end, and that's really cool. So somehow they managed to just make this a great anthem that doesn't sound particularly long. You're never bored, and almost 14 minutes long. So yeah, on side 2, we've got Back in the Village, which is a great, underrated Maiden song. Power Slave, maybe the best song on it, although I really love 2 Minutes to Midnight. But yeah, this is a really good album. Boy, look at this track listing. It's really good. But yeah, I would say 2 Minutes to Midnight, Back in the Village, Power Slave, and Rime of the Ancient Mariner are my favorite songs on here. This is a sole writing credit to Steve. And I understand he wrote it relatively quickly for a long song. So yeah, great choice. Classic Iron Maiden gallop, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, based on Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Power Slave, September 3rd, 1984.
Thank you, Martin. Always a pleasure having him on. He's written 150 books on hard rock and heavy metal. So he is by far one of the most preeminent experts. Did he say 3 beers version? Is that like a Canadian thing? I guess I'm going to have to Google that. Anyway, thanks, Martin. And yet again, we welcome the very familiar face, if you listen to this podcast a lot, producer extraordinaire, Mr. Jay Ruston. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm good anytime I get to talk about Iron Maiden and, of course, my favorite producer, Martin Birch, which we've done. Well, we've certainly talked a lot about Martin Birch. Not enough Iron Maiden yet, but we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. And this, of course...
Your favorite producer, Martin Birch?
It's probably yours too. My favorite producer. You're my favorite living producer.
Good answer.
But yeah, so yet again, Martin Birch, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, 13 minutes long, which is pretty incredible considering it was the 1980s and certainly a landmark song for Iron Maiden. I was thinking about this the other day about, all these Martin Birch produced Iron Maiden records, like which is my favorite sounding one. And I want to say Number of the Beast just because it's my favorite record, but I almost will go with Power Slave as maybe the album that I like the most overall sound-wise.
That's a really tough question to answer. For me, it's the 3 in a row, Peace of Mind, Number of the Beast, Power Slave, all 3 of them just sound incredible for different reasons. Number of the Beast has a little bigger bottom end, different drummer, obviously. It sounds a little more early 80s, like the snare drum sound and just everything about it. Then, Peace of Mind, they get Nico and it changes a little bit, still great sounding. And then Power Slave, which is my favorite Iron Maiden record, just top to bottom songs, production, everything. It's slightly more like mid-range sounding, which is interesting because they recorded at Compass Point, which is where they did Peace of Mind. But of course, everything changes, temperature, what time of year it was, who knows, changing gear. And a lot was changing between 1982 and 1985, technology-wise. Obviously, they're still on analog tape. They're still in the same room, but everything can change. But it still has Martin Birch's killer tones, great drum sound. You can hear every instrument perfectly. Yeah, I agree. The production on this record is stellar. And I'm always curious with this song. I've never been able to verify it, but I'm positive they at least recorded it in 2 halves, because I can hear the edit when they come out of the quiet section into the whole outro.
Yeah, I would assume that that's correct.
Yeah, I feel like the quiet piece in the middle was maybe recorded on its own, or certainly they might have done it as an end piece to the first section and then, started from scratch to get the whole ending. So very curious there, but I'm not quite sure exactly the details. But maybe someday I'll ask Adrian, since now his album mixer.
Yes. Very good. Yeah, the thing about this, really those 3 records, which I find the most interesting, is that they all sound very similar, but the guitar tones are a little bit different on each album. And I think that's where I kind of like this album the most, because it's a thicker, heavier guitar sound for me a little bit on this one. I don't know if they're using different equipment, using different guitars. I know those guys like to use a lot of different guitars when they record, because they have, and at this point they certainly have amassed, I'm sure, a pretty massive collection of guitars at that point. For whatever reason, it's hard to say whether it was the amps or the guitars or just the songs themselves too, because, when you listen to different albums by different bands, the song structures and the way they played the songs and what chords they're in and those sort of things also kind of play into how.
And if you compare the 3 records, Number of the Beast, again, a little more vintagey sounding guitars, not super distorted. It almost feels like it's like a blend of AC30 and Marshall, maybe. I'm not totally sure. But then you get to Peace of Mind, and the guitars have this like really heavy on the mid-range, not a lot of bottom to them, especially on like Flight of Icarus. It just sounds like kind of boxy a little bit, but works with what's going on in that record. And then you get to Power Slave, and you're right, the guitar sound just is bigger. And the drums aren't as thick and big, but the guitars are bigger, so it just makes the whole record have sort of a more colossal edge to it, which then of course led into Live After Death, which also it turned out amazing, so, and feels very live. Great version of this song on there as well. But yeah, I think guitar sound wise, they definitely took a big step forward, and each record after this, the guitar sound started changing pretty drastically, but this one for sure took a big step.
Well, yeah, right after this was Somewhere in Time, and then, of course, after that, Seventh Son, which I love both of those records, Seventh Son especially.
Me too.
But they started using those, what was it, the Rockman, that thing that Tom Scholz invented, that all of a sudden all these bands started using in the studio for what I'm sure there's a variety of reasons, but a lot of metal bands started using that. I wasn't the biggest fan of those sounds necessarily. I mean, it sounded good, but it just had it lacked a little bit of bottom end for me, but I'm not a guitar player, so I don't know what the allure was back then. But I remember when he invented that, it became this whole thing, and so many bands started using that in the studio as well as for practice or live or whatever it was.
I think for probably on the producer side of things, they were like, oh, more control, just plug a box in, don't have to lug a bunch of amps around. Oh, this is so easy and convenient. But in retrospect, yeah, not the best sound. It's obviously was heavily used with Def Leppard, Billy Idol, people like that. It's got a very distinctive sound, and yeah, Somewhere in Time has that sound very distinctively. Seventh Son doesn't feel like it does as much. This is certainly live amps. I don't hear it on this record.
Oh no, this is 100% live amps.
Kind of a mushy sound, but again, it's like, a lot of bands now are using Kempers or Quad Cortex or Fractal.
Yep.
It's getting better and better. Still not my thing or my favorite sound, but I've done some captures with Quad Cortex and been pretty astonished at, how close it comes. But this to me sounds like Marshalls.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, that's again why I just tend to go back to all these 70s and 80s records, because they were recorded, as they should be, as a band is recorded with, amps and guitars. Maybe that's just me, get off my lawn, old man sort of vibe. But still, I just love the way that old stuff sounds. And look, there's a lot of great sounding newer records too, and I love the technology, and it does certainly, have its benefits for sure. But I always like to go back to these. And this is kind of, honestly, like the mid '80s were kind of, mid to late '80s was kind of the tipping point of where things started to go more effects and more, little things you could do to make it sound different.
Yeah, like Somewhere in Time is much wetter than this record, a lot more reverb. So this is sort of the last of that type of production where it's getting a little reverby, but it's still, Number of the Beast is quite dry in comparison to this. And it just, everything, as you said, kept getting more affected. So I think that's why we go back to this record, because of its sound didn't quite become a victim of the late 80s overuse of, the shotgun snare and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Still sounds like a band in a room.
Yeah, at the time I kind of liked that snare sound a little bit, but now when I go back and listen to it, it's like, ooh, man, that's just too much. But thankfully, we don't have that on this record.
No.
And one thing that Martin Birch does that I think you do very well too is when he produces a record, you could definitely tell it's him, but it doesn't just sound all the same. And you could say that about, whatever it was, whether it's Rainbow or all the way back to Deep Purple and, certainly Iron Maiden, where I think each one of these Iron Maiden records kind of has its own sound. And that's a unique and difficult thing to do, is to make everything sound not the same.
Agreed. And it's definitely a goal of mine, is to capture a band's sound if they have one. And a lot of bands come to me, we don't know what we want to use. We don't have a specific guitar amp, or I don't have a specific drum set. And either way is fine with me. I'm happy to interject my opinion, but I still want to sound like that band. And I notice oftentimes, no matter what band it is and what amp we use, it still ends up sounding like that band. Certainly with guitar players, the Avatar guys or Scott Ian or any of those type of players can plug into an amp, it's going to sound like them regardless. And that is probably why, even though Maiden is clearly changing guitars and amps, all three of those records, the tone is still them. Certainly only sounds like them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and again, it comes down to the style of the way the guitar players play. And I've learned that, even early on in the studio. And again, I don't play anything, but you kind of learn that, how people play and how they even put together songs, and all the structures make such a big difference into how things sounded. And I was always really interested by that. Like, for example, I produced Show No Mercy and then Hell Awaits, two very different records, and certainly two very different bands at that time. I mean, same guys, but, they were, 18 when they're making Show No Mercy, and a couple of years older when doing Hell Awaits. But those records, if you listen to them, sound a lot different. I mean, look, we had more money and more budget on Hell Awaits than we certainly did on Show No Mercy. But it was the style and the way the band played, and certainly when they went on after that to Rain in Blood, all different sounding records, all the same band, pretty much playing the same instruments and the same amps and things, but the songs are so different that it lends to different production styles. I think that's a big key with what Iron Maiden's doing too, is that here you have, this record in particular, which is a lot of guitar and probably their most progressive album. You've got, Power Slave is 9 minutes. This is 13 minutes. There's a lot of things going on in those songs. So that, I think, accounts a lot for the sound of it.
I also think you have a band at their peak. Like, this is the pinnacle. Yes. They absolutely peaked here as musicians. Well, not as musicians. Obviously, they're still killer musicians. But they got to their peak as musicians and playing together as a band. A couple albums in a row now without any member changes, which is, they struggled with a little bit, or for whatever reason, each record almost had a different band member. And, you got a couple in a row now with the same band. They've been playing together for 4 or 5 years now. And you can tell, like, they're just, songwriting's progressing. Obviously Harris has a heavy hand in the songwriting, but Adrian and Bruce writing 2 Minutes to Midnight. And obviously the tour that followed, they just became household names beyond the metal crowd. If they never made another record after this, I still think they'd be in stadiums as they are right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, clearly as everybody knows, my favorite record is Number of the Beast. But I'd say when talking to people, like the three favorites that you get for the most part are Number of the Beast, Power Slave, and Peace of Mind is probably up there as well. those three in a row. But mostly I hear from people, it's either this album or Number of the Beast. I get that all the time. And that's, look, those are two great records to choose from, obviously.
Yeah, of course. And a lot of the purist fans that I know are into the first two records with Paul singing, of course. And I know lots of people that they're like, yeah, they were kind of done for me after those first two records. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I respect that. But for me, it's this record. I listen to this record at least once or twice a month. It's always there, ready.
Yeah, it's really a good one for sure. And this song is it's so interesting too, because you've got a song like this, which is this big, long, very complex song with this very quiet middle part, which I always love, because I think the brilliance of a lot of different bands. I mean, Rammstein does this perfectly, where you bring things down and quiet it up, and then you come back and hit people in the face, and it makes it hit even harder. And with this song specifically, you have this whole amazing first part of the song, and then it gets this very long, kind of quiet interlude, and then when it comes back in, it's like boom, hitting the face even harder, and you're like, wow, I think it was just one continuous 13-minute long heavy song, it wouldn't have the impact that it does without that kind of quiet, nice little break part in the middle.
Oh, of course. And as a teenager, and just starting to learn how to play bass guitar, this song changed my life, because I was like, wow, first of all, the whole breakdown section is all bass.
Yep.
Then when that ends and it comes into the next part, it's still all bass. The guitars are very much secondary.
Yeah, Steve Harris.
I mean, Maiden and Rush in general were very bass centric. And as a teenager learning to play bass and, deciding that was going to be my instrument, it was just the greatest thing ever. So this song is hugely important to me in my musical development. I learned how to play it top to bottom, jamming at my bedroom, many times. And then, of course, realizing that a big part of what I was appreciating was the production, and Martin Birch, of course, who is just the greatest ever. And, my idol. I wish I could have met him. I wish Compass Point wasn't gone. I would fly there tomorrow and stand in that room if I could. And I should have when it was still open, because it didn't close that long ago.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. And on that note, thanks as always for doing this. And I'm sure we'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks, Brian.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Okay, so if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, which if you're not, please go check it out and subscribe. We're at the beautiful Space here in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. By the way, if you need a podcast studio, you need a room for a party, you need to show a film, you need to throw a concert, anything, the Space is a great place in Las Vegas to do that. Please hit them up and hit up their website. So we haven't talked enough Iron Maiden. As you guys know, and I mentioned earlier, Iron Maiden is my favorite band of all time. And we have not talked a lot, but don't fret, people. We're getting there. We're getting closer. We're still a few months away, but we're getting closer to the top 20 songs that define heavy metal. And of course, within that top 20, there's going to be at least 2 Iron Maiden songs. There might even be more. We'll see. But stay tuned for that. That's coming up in a few months. We got time. But today we're going to talk about one of the most legendary songs of all time in heavy metal for a variety of reasons, which we will discuss. Now, when I'm going to talk Iron Maiden, especially on this podcast, it's very important for me that I talk about Iron Maiden with somebody that knows their stuff. And we welcome in my good friend from Unchained Management. They manage, amongst others, Killswitch Engage, Lorna Shore, Queensryche, Canninbal Corpse, White Chapel, a whole plethora of incredible artists. Mr. Vaughn Lewis, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, Brian. Thanks for having me.
And more importantly, you're a Maiden fanatic, just like I am. We've seen, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we've seen Iron Maiden multiple times in multiple countries all around the world. So you know your Maiden stuff. And you were the one we were talking about what song to do. And I've done something really old, really new, or newer with The Wicker Man with our good friend Chris Jericho, and then something really old with Murders in the Rue Morgue. So I wanted to get into the kind of the classic period of Iron Maiden that most people are into. And we talked about a couple of records in the middle of it, and we came up with Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Why did you pick this song, sir?
It's funny because it took me a second to come up with a song, and I don't know why I didn't just pick this from the start. For me, this is one of the, Power Slave was the first record where I discovered Iron Maiden. And Rime of the Ancient Mariner really encompasses everything that is Iron Maiden in the sense of it's a classic song. It's one of the long Iron Maiden songs. I think it was like the longest Iron Maiden song for a long time.
It was one of the longest metal songs of all time when it came out. It's like 1345. It's long.
It's long. You know, from a production standpoint, from just a sonic standpoint of like all the peaks and valleys of the song and how it's never boring, but it's also, you know, Iron Maiden is known for being into history, and a lot of their songs encompass a lot of things in history. And this is an unusual one in that it's based on a poem.
Yep.
Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And for me, it's kind of a random thing, but when this song came out, I was in the 9th grade. In our English class, we were reading all these poems. And one of the poems that we read was Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Same here. I'm a little bit older than you are, but same thing when I was in school. This was one of the things that we had to read.
You know, as like a 15-year-old kid, I couldn't stop myself and tell the teacher, you know, there's a band that I love that has a song about this. Kind of being a wise ass, really. And she said, you know what? Bring the record in. Oh. We'll play it. And she made me do this thing. And it's funny thinking back on it because a lot of times when you were younger, you read these things, and I was the king of reading like the Cliff Notes to try to kind of cheat around it, and that never really worked. But this was almost like a Cliff Notes for this poem, and we sat in class. She played the record, the whole song full through, and then played it again.
Oh wow!
And made me kind of go through the poem and go and what parts of the song we're talking about, what songs of the poem, and it brings back all the things that Iron Maiden is. It's a great band, great song, but also really smart and really intelligent. And I ended up winning like an award at graduation because of this.
That's awesome.
Because of this, but
what was the response in the room with all the other kids?
It's funny because I was trying to think back on this, and I was trying to remember all the different details. And I think in general, even though the majority of the class did not listen to this kind of music, there were a couple of kids that did, that loved it. But the rest of the class, I think everyone just thought it was interesting. It was just, it was different than, you know, sitting in a classroom and going through a late 17th century poem. We had a phonograph out, or a turntable, like one of those turntables with the speakers in it, and we were listening to music, and I think everybody thought it was really cool. So I was kind of like
that's a great
the cool
story.
kid for a day.
Have you ever told that to Rod?
No.
So to go back on that, because it's one of my favorite stories of all time. So both Vaughn and I have become friends with Rod Small, which I think if you would have told either of us at 18 that this was going to happen in the future, we'd both going to go, what are you talking about? You're crazy. So one of my favorite stories, we were in Nashville, Tennessee, seeing Iron Maiden play in Nashville. Amazing show, of course.
It's a great show.
And we're afterwards, and we're hanging out in Rod's room, which was his room backstage, which he always invited us to. In fact, I think that show we were having dinner next door, because if you don't know, the arena in Nashville is like right next to all the famous bars and restaurants and stuff there. So we're having dinner beforehand. I think Rod texted you and said, "Where are you guys? I'm here. I've got beer. Come on over." And we're like, "Oh my God, this is like so
Let's go."
surreal." So anyway, we go over there, and and I don't really drink beer, but I have to with Rod, which is fine because it's not terrible beer. But anyway, so we watched the show. Show's great. We're hanging out afterwards, and all of a sudden, Rod goes, "Hey, Doc McGee has a bar here, and we're all going to go there. Maiden's doing a party, an after party there, so we're all going to go." And like Vaughn and I are like, "Okay, cool." But in the back of my mind, this is pre-Uber, by the way. I'm going like, "Where is this? Like, how we're gonna go all the way out there? How are we going to get back? Because I don't know where it is." And we were staying right next to the arena. So anyway, it's this big dog and pony show. Rod's got to get this. It's like 8 of us, and he's got to get a van, and his assistant's working on getting the van. So we get the van, and we load up in the van in the bowels of the arena, and we drive about 15 minutes, and we get out. to where the club is, and I look around, and the arena is like literally 150 feet over there. I go, Rod, the arena's right there. You just gotta walk over here.
We drove around the crowded Nashville block.
Yeah, that was because I was like, we were both kind of like, oh, okay, this is cool. I mean, I'm not gonna, can't turn down Rod Smallwood, but I don't know where this is gonna go, where it's gonna end up at. But it was a fun night, and that's the only time. Like I've talked many times about this. I've only talked to Steve Harris once in my entire life. That was an interview him for my fanzine in 1981. So Rod, poor guy's trying to leave this party, and Vaughn runs after him and goes, "You got to take a photo of my friend Brian." I was like, "No, don't." So, but he was very nice and took the photo and then ran away very quickly. But anyway, back to Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So it's really, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and it's always fascinating because it just depends on where you come in to Iron Maiden on what your favorite record is. Yep. Like mine is Number of the Beast, and really the three that I hear the most are Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, and Power Slave. Those are the three. So it kind of depends on when you come in, and you came in obviously on Power Slave. I was talking a little bit earlier with Jay Ruston about this album. This is kind of, as even though Number of the Beast is my favorite record of all time, I think this is kind of the record where they kind of got it all right. They got it all together. The sound is great. The songs are really great. I love the fact that there's these really, really long, I mean, Power Slave is 9 minutes. This is 13 and a half minutes. Yeah. So many great songs on this record. It really was kind of their crescendo of the early days, where they've got probably I don't want to say as big as they were, but up there. And it's just really interesting to me because you think about a record like this, which really, when you look at, aside from 2 Minutes to Midnight, which is that's a rock and roll, metal, big hit song, more or less. But everything else on that record is very different and very, a lot of it's progressive, although I argue that this song's pretty progressive, but Martin Popoff in his little intro said he didn't think it was that progressive, but he's Canadian, so we'll let his opinion slide. But I have, Power Slave in this, and so it's a record that you wouldn't think would be, especially, in 1984 when this record came out, that this was going to be a record that people were going to go crazy over, but they did, and I guess that's just the brilliance of Maiden. It
absolutely is, and it's the thing with Maiden that you always have to really respect is every record, they always do what they're going to do. They do their thing. They don't, it's not necessarily what you think they're going to do, what you think they should do from record to record. Every record is a true testament of where they're at that moment of their career.
But that's the way every big band is, and every big band should be. And I've said over and over again, don't listen to your influences, but don't sound like them, and just make the record, make the music that you want to make. And if you talk to the Metallica guys, they make the music that those four guys want to make, and Maiden's the same way. They make the music, well, probably more that Steve Harris wants to make, but the guys in the band, they all want to make that. They're just going to do it whether. And again, I'm sure in the face of, I can only imagine back in the day when Capitol gets this record, they go, 2 minutes to midnight, great. Well, what are these like long songs? What are we going to do with those? Especially in 1984, yeah. But it works.
It works, and even throughout the rest of their career, I mean, one of the things that I always, especially as a manager, as much as a fan, is just how much when they make a new record. I'll remember. The first time they did a tour where they played the majority of the new record, this is after when Bruce Dickinson rejoined the band, and they played 4 old songs, and all the old fans got upset. Like, they only did 4 old songs. They didn't do this, they didn't do that. But that, staying true to who they were and what they did, it garnered a whole younger fan base. It's the thing that kept their fan base young. They kept their old fans, but they also got a whole bunch of new fans. And then they do these tours where, when they're touring on a new record, that's what you're going to hear. And you're going to hear some classics. And then they do a classic records tour. It's really the blueprint for having the career that you want to have.
Yeah.
And that record, I mean, that whole record, Power Slave, I mean, it really, no one could have predicted that. No one could have predicted that that's where they're at. 2 songs that take up 22 minutes of a record.
But that's why it's so great, because it was so different. Yeah. That's what I loved about it. Was like, this doesn't, I mean, that's always what I've loved about Maiden, is nobody sounds like them, and they do things that really shouldn't work. Yeah. And like I said, those 2 really long songs, which now, whatever, people do that stuff all the time. It's not a big deal. But in 1984, it's a whole
That was unheard of.
Yeah, but that's the thing about Maiden. I always loved them. So whatever music I love, I want everybody else to love.
Yep.
But when I look back on it, especially this record, I go, wow, that's pretty trippy that record became so big when it was not commercial whatsoever, other than really 2 Minutes to Midnight.
Yeah, which was kind of how it went for bands. Like you made these records that garnered a nice fan base, and then you had like the breakthrough record that had the hits, and they didn't really have that, but they were still massive.
The interesting thing too about this song, I mean, look, for me, all the Maiden stuff stands the test of time, but I think this song in particular, especially interesting for a song that's 14 minutes long and based on a poem, and all the things we've discussed. It's still huge today. They still play it constantly. In fact, like apparently Steve Harris, Steve and Bruce don't agree on a lot of things, but they all love playing this song live, and that's I think one of the reasons why they play it. And it's become one of those songs where if they don't, like you mentioned earlier, if they don't play certain songs, people get mad. Yeah. So they play this song over these years, like more than I would ever thought they would. Figured they'd put this in the mothballs at some point because it's awfully long song, but they haven't. I
mean, it's a great song. It has. Lyrically, it's genius. It's different. It's based on a poem. It takes some of the lines from the poem and fits it into the song. That's insane. Musically, it's a driving song. The bass lines are insane. The drums sound ridiculous. When everything, in the middle where everything is kind of quiet and, there's like the low reading of, a part of the poem, and then the music kicks back in and the solo hits, that's epic.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's another moment like that in a song by a band. I mean, that's how intense that is.
Yeah, I mentioned this when talking to Jay, but that's the formula that I love. I love when heavy songs get quiet for just a little bit, and then they come back in and hit you in the face even harder.
Yeah,
like it's just 13 minutes of raging metal, be one thing, but that whole quiet thing, it kind of lulls you to sleep a little bit. Yeah. Alice Cooper did that really well with Black Juju. There's one of his early songs in 1971 where they kind of have this like little moment, it's like sleep. And like really, and they start screaming, "Wake up!" It's like those sort of moments are so great. And Maiden, I mean, Maiden's the kings of doing those things, especially in this song where it comes back in. And you're right, that whole part coming back in is so crazy.
It's so epic. And then, you add Live After Death with that as well, and
live
hearing that version of it, I think that also gave it like some sort of extra kind of folklore thing around it for them playing it live, because that version of it, it's like you have the album version, which is sick, and then you have that Live After Death version, which
and they do a great
insane.
job. And I always have to remember that when we talk about these songs, there are usually a studio version and a live component. For me, I'm always the studio guy, but I always forget that there's a live component. And I mean, it's so good. And from what I know, that record's pretty much live. I'm sure they fixed a few things here and there, like you almost have to. But it's pretty live, and I mean, because I was at all those shows.
Yeah, I wish.
I was at every one of those shows. In fact, I was at all the ones in LA, and I was at 2 of the ones in England.
Wow.
Which was, that was like amazing for me as a
I was a little too young. I remember when I did have some friends who went, I was an only child. My parents were kind of strict, and I was young. I remember all my friends going to Radio City. I think they played like a bunch of nights. I remember one night got canceled, but, for me, adding to that song like Live After Death is just that was the capturing of that moment, and I never got to see it, so that was insane for me. It wasn't until somewhere in time that I finally got to see them, but it's the perfect song. It's again for Iron Maiden, it's a different juxtaposition from the historical aspect of what the album begins with Aces High and like a Winston Churchill speaking. That they were known for that. the poem thing was kind of a different.
But they've always done that. That's what I love about them. They're, the songs are based on either history or old movies or books or poems. And, certainly Steve Harris is a very smart, well-read guy. And I just love that they can take these, interesting things and make songs out of them that make sense. One of my favorites is, you mentioned Somewhere in Time, is Alexander the Great, which I cannot believe that they played that live on that last tour. I was like, that's probably my number one song I always wanted to see live, and I always bother Rod about that. Hey, Rod. He's like, probably not. Damn it. And they finally played it. But that's another interesting song because it's just all based on history. And they put his whole lifetime in this, in a 9-minute long song, however long.
And that was a long song on Somewhere in Time, which that was like the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner of Somewhere in Time.
They always kind of do have the long songs at the end, and just Maiden in general is just you can argue Metallica's probably a bigger metal band than Maiden, although it depends on what parts of the earth you're talking about, for sure. But they're the top two clearly, and Maiden, of course, Metallica, of course, is massive fans of Iron Maiden, as we all are, and as all we should be. It's funny because I'm just so blinded by my Maiden love, and like they're the greatest band of all time. But I get other people. I've had many conversations about the Priest Maiden argument, which I get. I've had that conversation with Kerry King quite a bit because he's a massive
Priest fan.
He's a massive Priest fan. But I get that. Look, there's no wrong answer.
There's no wrong answer. Yeah.
Taste is your taste. But for me, it's always been Maiden, and this was the record. So I got in early, obviously, because I'd heard the demo tapes. So I listened to each record as it came out.
That's amazing.
And for me, Number of the Beast, when it first came out, I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
I love Bruce and Samson. So I love Deano. I love those two Deano records. I think they're phenomenal records. But I loved him in Samson. I go, well, when they chose him, I go, oh, this is going to be good. Wow. And of course, Number of the Beast came out. It was amazing. Like you mentioned, there's still people that like the Deano, which is fine because those records are phenomenal, and I love those records as well. But each record after that, and Jay brought up a point that because this is the first album back to back where they didn't have different players. Like there are different members on every record really up until this, and this is the second one, obviously, excuse me, after A Peace of Mind, where it's the same guys. So I think that they kind of fell into place too with just the playing and the songwriting. The production's brilliant. Of course, Martin Birch, the greatest producer of all time, in my opinion. It sounded good. So they kind of hit their stride on this record, and like everything is so good. But I remember listening to it, and it's a lot. And I got it, and it's like I like it, but there's so much to digest on here. When I'm a kid back in '84 when this record came out, and that was a long record for that time period, a long record, and there's so many things going on. It probably took me, I want to say it took me at least about a week before I liked it, but I was just, I don't get it yet.
It took me a bunch of listens. So for me, that record was it was out. Had a lot of friends that were into it, and it's kind of the typical thing for that time period. You had a group of friends, everybody buys records, you listen to the records together, people turn you on to things. That was kind of like, at that point I was listening to, AC/DC and Van Halen, and, I grew up around a lot of music. There was a lot of, early hip hop that was guitar driven, like Run DMC in that time frame. Maiden was different. They were, they were heavier. The songs weren't, your typical rock songs, typical choruses. Imagine, for you being into them, like me just kind of discovering them, and that's kind of the time frame that your musical palette is widening. So it took me a second, and when I got it, I got it. And it's the gateway. There's always these different periods where something is a gateway to the next thing, and at that point, that was like by far the heaviest thing I listened to. And
it's interesting. You made an interesting point that you listen to these records with your friends. I was the complete opposite of that. I went home to my bedroom and listened to it by myself because I was so into it. It goes all the way back to I was listening to Kiss. I remember Kiss Alive when it came out. I always wanted to just listen to it by myself because I just wanted to focus in on it. And then later you'd go and listen with your friends.
Well, with this particular, because I'm the same way. I listen to a lot of records by myself.
But it was new for you.
But it was new for me. I was exposed to it. So when I heard it, it was somebody else playing it. Like, this is awesome. And then I would go get it. And then I would go sit at home and listen to it on my own. And it took me a second. And that was kind of like the thing with our group of people. Like, especially for the stuff that was a little more to take in, somebody would be like, no, you got to listen to this. You got to spend some time with this. Or we'd all listen to it and not get it, and then somebody would get it. Like, you know what? Listen to it again. That was Maiden for that time period. And I always have this thing with records. I always explain to people that, like, there's a record that you first got into a band on, and or it's the record that you went to the store the day it came out.
Yep.
For whatever reason. You were into the band, or you liked the cover, or, you know, you read about it, that this was coming out, and you wanted to get it. Those are big records. That experience never leaves you. So for Maiden, for me, Power Slave was the record that I got into them on. It was the record that I got them on. Somewhere in Time was the record that I...
So you get into Power Slave, and then you start going backwards, obviously.
1,000%.
And then what was your opinion, you know, coming in on the Bruce stuff about the first two with Deanna? What did you think about those?
Funny enough, it probably took me a second on those first two records because...
It was so different.
It was so different vocally. Yep. But then when I started listening to a lot of punk rock, those first two Maiden records really, because his delivery is like just...
Very punk rock.
It's very punk rock. Over time, I really got into those records. Now it's all part of a catalog that I love.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, you know, their voices are really different.
You mentioned something else that I find interesting, because a lot of people are the same way. Like, sometimes it takes a few listens to get into a certain band. Things would just hit me immediately. As soon as I heard something, oh my God, what is this? This is amazing. And I mentioned on this record, it took me a while to like completely understand it, I guess, is the way, because there's so much stuff going on. I knew I really loved it because it was Maiden, and I probably, like a lot of times back then, I would just sit in my room just for hours on end, just listening to these records over and over and over again. Like, what, I have to eat, I have to go to work, I have to do something else? Really? Do I have to? And I think at this point I was actually out of the record store. I was just doing the label, so I had a little more time to mess around with that stuff, but still not as much. But yeah, it's fascinating because I did a podcast a while ago. It was with Jericho and Merlin Alderslave, who was a Metal Hammer guy. And there's 3 different generations of Maiden fans. We talked about Senjutsu right when it came out, actually. And it was interesting talking because, you know, Merlin's a younger guy. He's like in his 30s. So he loves like the second coming of the Bruce records. Like, he came in on Brand New World. And so he loves all that stuff. And then Jericho is kind of in the middle, where he came in. He came in a little bit later, obviously, and he loves the secondary Bruce stuff. And I'm the old dude coming in from the original. But it's interesting to get all these different people's takes, and I love it's the same way with any metal band that's been around for a long time. You have fans coming in at different points of their career. So, you know, some people for Metallica, like some people love the Black Album the most, or even Load, because that's what they came in on. It just almost kind of doesn't matter when you come in. If you come in on those records, you love those records. Yeah, so it's fascinating talking about all that sort of stuff with fans, but at the end of the day, I think everybody likes the whole of what it is, especially this record. I find this record probably more than any other Maiden record that the newer fans who are younger and the older fans, this is kind of the record that we all
everybody
agree
loves,
I mean, Number of the Beast is the same way, just because you almost have to say that at this point, but this one is the one that I think everybody kind of agrees, like that's the record, no matter when you came in on Maiden or what your age is, that you go, that record's like one of your top 3 Maiden records of all time.
And to your point, it is interesting that that's the one. It is rather interesting. I know for me, I think it was the Brave New World tour. I saw that show in New York. I think I had just gotten back from Japan. I was in Japan with a band, and I'd gotten back. I flew in that day. I was tired and decided I had to go.
Where did they play?
Well, back then it's probably called the Continental Airlines Arena at that point in
Jersey, right?
In Jersey.
Because I saw that tour out there, but I couldn't remember if I saw it on Long Island or in New Jersey.
It definitely played Long Island as well.
Both,
yeah. I remember I rode the bus. I took the train into the city, and I rode the bus because I was tired. I just literally got back.
The bus ride was like 10 minutes to it.
Exactly.
I used to go to Devils games all the time. I love that from Penn Station.
And that was one of the tours where they played a lot of new songs. And I remember, like, there were a lot of young kids on that bus. And you were just listening to the chatter, and they were talking about the different songs, and they were talking about, like, I hope they play this, I hope they play that. And then there was some talk about some of the, this song reminded them of an older song. And then on the ride back, it's kind of a similar thing where they're talking about, oh, they didn't play this, but they played most of that record at that point. And I remember just thinking, like, it reminded me of when I was young and when I saw them the first time at that same place over 10 years before that. That's when I realized that what they're doing with their fan base is amazing, because we all know that it's hard for a band to stay around, stay relevant, and get younger. And that was
an interesting time for Maiden, because they just did the 2 records with Blaze Bayley, which didn't do very well at all. And I remember they were playing, like a lot of bands, Motley did the same thing. Even Van Halen, they went from playing arenas to 2,000 seaters or 2,500 seaters, and then all of a sudden Bruce comes back in and make this new record, and all of a sudden it just breathed life into this band, and they went back to playing arenas again almost instantly. With a whole bunch of different fan bases, because again, Brave New World's another one where so many people say that's where they came in for Maiden, because if you weren't old enough to get into stuff before Bruce left, because the 90s were weird for metal anyway, for everybody, especially for Maiden. But then all of a sudden, Brave New World comes out, it's kind of a throwback to the old stuff, and Wicker Man, which we talked about, like I mentioned with Jericho on this podcast. You can go listen to that after this one if you'd like, please. And just kind of infused a whole bunch of new energy into the band. So it's interesting that, I think a lot of kids, like you mentioned, came in on that too. But like I mentioned before, the one thing I love is everybody backtracks to it's just natural. You do that all the time anyway. But always backtrack to this record. And this song, like I think I've seen a lot of, Iron Maiden lists of like, what's the best songs? And it's the typical stuff that you would see. But this one is always in the top 10, which I would never, again, it's like over 13 minutes long. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. I get, Number of the Beast and, Run to the Hills and New Witness to Midnight, all the kind of songs that are the ones that people talk about. But this one's always in those lists. And it's one of those songs too where even amongst Maiden fans, we are like, what's the best song? Of course, for me it's Hallowed Be Thy Name, but we go back and forth, and now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever had an argument about this song where people just don't love it, no matter where you came in on Maiden or how big a fan you are or you aren't.
Like I said, I think it has everything you want. It's a driving song. It's a long song, but there's nothing wasted.
And you don't get bored.
You don't get bored. That middle part where it gets quiet and they're reading the poem, they're reading parts of the poem. It's like, you've just been hit over the head for a couple minutes. Now you have a couple minutes to breathe. And then just as you start to relax, now you're like being punched in the face. It's like you can't go wrong.
Like I said earlier, that part just makes that second part so much heavier because of that little resting period you've had.
And it doesn't seem like a 13-minute song. I mean, when you're listening to it, it really doesn't.
Especially live, because and there's I always credit Bruce, because they have a lot of these songs where Bruce isn't singing for a long period of time. Sometimes he'll go off the stage for a few minutes and recuperate. I'm sure have a water or something. But there's a lot of times he can get the crowd going and just make it look interesting. Where a song like this, by the time it's over, you're like, really? Didn't it just start a few minutes ago? It's over already? How's that possible? It's just a tremendous song. And I was a huge Clive Burr fan, and Clive was my guy as a drummer, and I knew Nico because he was in Pat Travers before this, and I was a big Pat Travers fan. And look, Nico's phenomenal. Even on Peace of Mind, I was worried. I was definitely worried. Like, I don't know. And he, of course, nailed it. So, but I think this song in particular is one of his best performances. Where, again, the drums always drive stuff, and clearly with Maiden, the bass is there too. But this song, he really
goes
crushes
to town on this song. All the fills, the drivingness of it, and then the interplay with Steve Harris. Like, it's just that song. It's that Maiden gallop all the way through. Some of the best solos. I mean, it's really the perfect song. I can't say that enough.
Well, I mean, those two guys, Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. I couldn't. They're one person. In my opinion, so in my mind. But those two guys, I still say they're so underrated. I mean, even they're one of the biggest bands, they don't get as much credit. Maybe because there's two of them, I guess, and they both equally take the solos and stuff, but just so good and so underrated. Like, they should be a lot higher up. Like, you read these, Rolling Stone, all these other, lists of all these amazing guitar players.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they aren't on there. It's like,
they're both amazing,
and
they have very distinct different styles. Like, they're not the same player. Like, I think they're incredibly underrated for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've done, I don't know how many podcasts with Jericho about Maiden, because we're both, like I said, fanatics, and we talk about how you can tell. I remember when we're doing the podcast for Senjutsu, we're like, who's doing which solo. If it doesn't sound like Dave or Adrian, then okay, it must be Yannick. Must be Yannick. But yeah, it's like so underrated, man. It's like that's the one thing about. I mean, Maiden's huge, and obviously I'm biased on every part of it, but still, like those two guitar players, they should be in a lot of those lists.
No doubt about it.
At least look, they don't have to be in the top 20, fine, but they should be on those lists. Yeah, it kind of drives me nuts.
One thing I just wanted to add, we were talking about like, Metallica and, just big metal bands. I think the thing that's very different with Iron Maiden is the way that they've been able to sustain this for as long as they have without like, a quote unquote hit. Thing without, I mean,
no
radio in
no
the US
videos,
is non-existent. No big videos. I mean, they made some videos, but they weren't, they didn't get played.
I mean, Flight of Icarus probably got played a lot on MTV there, but they don't. But since then, you don't really see a lot of stuff. Ozzy's Bonehead, of course, will play Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
But other than that, like if you listen to a lot of these classic rock stations, they're playing.
Yeah, they play some.
And every once in a while, they play Maiden, but they don't really get it. And that's the thing. You're 100% right. I think it's a little bit different outside of North America on that front. But here, I mean, they're just no big radio hits.
No big radio.
No nothing, but they've sustained it and they've been able to work. I think just because how great the band is, how well they relate to their fans, they don't care about mainstream stuff. And I love that. It's like they're always like, F the mainstream and, F the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. By the way, the fact they're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is like
insane.
one of the most
That's insane.
biggest tragedies of all time. But they don't care. They're like, we don't even get to show up.
I think us fans definitely care more than they do.
They don't care, which is I love that. I love that they don't care about the mainstream. They don't care what people think. They don't care about these honors and accolades. They just like, we're a band. We go out and we play for the fans, and I think that's why people love them. Because that's the one thing about metal fans, and you know this better than anybody does. The fans know. Like, we know what's good, what's not good, what's being fed to us, what's fake. And that's why I always loved about metal. Like, you can get away with not being as authentic as you should be sometimes for a minute. But over the course of time, all these major bands that are metal bands are all authentic bands that do it for the right reasons, that do it because they love the music and they love the fans, and all the other accolades and stuff doesn't matter. And Maiden is like the pinnacle of that.
One other point I always like to make about just their career, and I always try to stress this to bands, like if you've had a career and you've been around for a while and you're still making music and you still believe in the music, when you've got a new record, play those songs. I think a lot of times bands, they want to revert back to the songs that are getting the immediate reaction. They want to play all the songs. It's just easier to play all the songs that people know. And I think Maiden they give their new music value because they go out and they play those songs. And then, when those records are 4 and 5 years old, they intersperse those songs the same way they intersperse the older songs.
But they also keep the fans happy because they'll go out and they'll do a whole tour on the new record and they'll play a variety of that stuff. But then the next tour is all the hits to keep the fans happy.
And I think that is the reason that they've been able to maintain this thing that never gets old. It always generates younger kids. I mean, I think the last record was, as far as like a new release and charting, was like one of their best charting records. And it's because like they put a value on what they're creating now just as much as what they've already created. And I think a lot of bands sometimes they get a little lazy. Not that they don't love their new music, but they need that like instant gratification of like I play the hit and everybody goes nuts. And Maiden challenges their audience and it works.
100%. 100%. Well, look, you and I could talk Maiden for the next 5 hours, but unfortunately, Pantheon will not let me do that. But I mentioned earlier, we have a YouTube page where you can see this complete interview because we went pretty long today, so you can check that out. But dude, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And there you have it. Fun podcast talking about my favorite band of all time, Iron Maiden, and one of their greatest songs of all time, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Big thanks to my buddy Vaughn Lewis, the great Jay Ruston, the expert Mr. Martin Popoff, Lizzie Borden for our theme song, and the man who keeps it all together, our producer, Mr. Christian Blatt. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next episode.
100!